Welcome everybody to this month's Young Professionals Series webinar. Before we get started, just an introduction. My name is Matthew Fox, the Community Development Manager here at CSI, and I am joined today by my co-worker, Caitlin Solomon. Caitlin, if you'd like to say hello.
Hi, thanks, Matt. Yeah, we're excited to have you guys join us for Part 5 in our Understanding the Project Team series. If you've been with us from the beginning, welcome back. We're glad you're finding continual value, and I'm sure today's panel will be amazing. If you haven't joined us before, what we're doing is an Understanding the Project Team series. So we have started out with different parts of the project team, starting with owners in September. So we've covered architects, engineers, and in December, right before you all went for holiday break, if anyone had a fun vacation, we had a great webinar panel on specifiers and information managers. So we're kicking off the new year talking about understanding the contract administrator. We have a wonderful panel of volunteers who are looking forward to talking with you guys. Douglas Freeman, Nathan Woods, and Brian Varner. And Matt's going to be giving a more in-depth bio before they speak today. And please remember that we do allot a lot of time for question and answers, so feel free to either put your questions on Twitter or in the chat box, so you'll have plenty of time to ask these three gentlemen anything you've ever wanted to know about contract administration. As always, we invite you to participate online with us. I will be live tweeting on Twitter using the hashtag CSIYPS. So feel free to tweet comments, highlights, questions for our panelists. That's another great avenue if you don't necessarily like the chat feature. And because I like to bribe people to talk with me on Twitter, if you actually tweet your biggest takeaway from this presentation, or if you're live tweeting with me all day, you will be entered to win a CSI swag bag. So I am the keeper of the swag, and I hope I have the opportunity to mail some out to someone after today's webinar. You also can continue today's conversation on our Young Professionals LinkedIn group. Submit questions or suggestions for next month's call. You can post your own observations, experiences, or articles for professional development. If you are not part of our LinkedIn group, simply go online to linkedin.com and search CSI Young Professionals. And Matt, I'm going to turn it back over to you so you can kind of give some housekeeping rules before we begin.
Douglas Freeman has both a Master's of Architecture and a Juris Doctorate of Law and has been practicing in the construction industry for nearly 30 years. In addition to his work at Andre Johnson Architect, Douglas serves as the co-chair of the CSIConstruction Contract Administration Practice Group and is an active member of the American Institute of Architects, the National Organization of Minority Architects, also known as NOMA, and the American Society of Interior Designers. At this time, I want to just give Douglas 5 to 7 minutes or so to talk a little bit about his experience and how he got to where he is in the industry within contract administration, and what tools or information during these last 25 to 30 years or so of his professional career that have kind of led him to where he is today. So Douglas, if you want to join in the conversation, we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you for having me. Hopefully I can add some value to somebody out there. This is Douglas Freeman, and I'm not quite sure where to start. It was 9th grade when I decided I wanted to be an architect. So this has been a focus of mine for as long as I can remember. Went back to law school after being in architectural practice for a while. Went back not to change professions, but because I wanted the education. I felt like it would be help to me. And so I have worked in all phases of the profession: design, production, management, but the majority of my career has been in construction administration. I enjoy it. I like being able to get out in the field and interact with contractors. I learn something every day. And as Matt said, presents with the CSI, the Construction Administration Practice Group. We would invite anyone to join in on those sessions as well. The next one will be next Tuesday. I'm giving a plug here, so next Tuesday at 12. You can go to the CSI's website to get the information from Matt. You can get it from Matt. And would welcome anyone to join in and listen on those as well. Each month, myself and a good friend of mine, Jim Raines, sole practice is construction administration. We talk about different issues that affect us during the construction administration days. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to the next speaker.
All right. Well, looks like Douglas is going to be quick and to the point for me today here. I was just getting ready to type some more info, but I'm sure we'll hear more from him as we get going through today's session. With that, I did want to then introduce more formally our second panelist of the day, Nathan Woods. There we go. Nathan has over 25 years of professional architecture experience and 15 years dedicated to construction administration. Nathan's expertise includes a diverse range of project types spanning the range from houses to hospitals. He also has a proficiency with multiple delivery methods such as IPD, design build, design assist, multi-prime, and more conventional project delivery variants. In his role as Senior Construction Administrator, he personally manages multiple significant projects while providing guidance and support to all project teams during the CA process. In addition to maintaining healthy client relationships on major projects, his in-house duties include developing, training, and implementing the tools, forms, procedures, and practice guidelines for staff performing construction administration. Nathan provides in-house expertise and detailing guidance based on extensive materials and constructability knowledge. So Nathan, at this time, we'd like to hand it off to you to talk a little bit about the long-term path and where you got to and how you decided on construction administration and any tips and tricks along the way for you. Nathan?
Alrighty, hello. My interest in CA pretty much started with Legos. Just like the rest of us who became architects, Legos was inspirational. But I found myself, instead of playing with Legos, what I enjoyed doing the most was building the Legos and tearing them down and building something new. I never really sat and played with the built model at the end. So it was the continual construction and development of the model that I really enjoyed. And that parlayed into architecture, and then when I got into architecture, I spent the first, nearly probably 10 years drafting, either by hand drafting, and then later I moved to CAD. And moving to CAD was, to me, a bit of a disappointment. When you're hand drafting, you have a sense of accomplishment when you finish a drawing. You step back and you clear out the smudges, and your artwork is there on the page for all to see. In CAD, you kind of click File, Save As, and start a new file. It's not nearly as satisfying. So I became interested in finding other avenues for me to be creative. And the construction administration process appealed to me, and I went into that. Jumped in with both legs, really. Started managing several different projects at once as more or less basically a job captain level architect. And I learned such a stupendous amount of lessons through the CA process that I rapidly increased my architectural know-how and value to the company. What you learn in CA, what hurts you in CA, should never hurt you again. You learn through your mistakes, and as you discover through your relationship with the contractor, what kinds of things they need on the plans versus what I provided. That feedback loop is just absolutely phenomenal. And so I really came to enjoy that. I also enjoyed the timeliness and pressure. There's a contractor out there, if you can imagine, the guy out there with a hammer and nail, ready to hang a picture. There's a guy out there with a hammer and nail going, where? And you've got to answer right now, or else I can guarantee you he will put it in the wrong spot. So the timeliness, the time pressure, I guess, as well as the ability to be decisive and to be also have some sort of administrative acumen where you are documenting things well so you can go back and retrieve and find them. It was sort of the balance of these skills that really appealed to me. It's not for a timid or wallflower type person. This is not a part of the industry where you can step back and be quiet. There is definitely an alpha type personality, I think, to a successful construction administrator, because you're dealing with a lot of other alpha personalities out in the field. And it's too easy for someone to be pushed around and manipulated, especially when you're young. My very first construction administration meeting was a couple days before a big concrete pour for the slab on grade. And the superintendent, this old grizzly old guy, looked at me and says, well, we're going to pour the slab and then we'll come back to follow. It was a Friday. We're going to pour the slab on a Friday and then come back on a Monday. We'll do the saw cuts. And he looked at me with this sort of a challenging expression on his face, and I looked back at him and started thinking about what I knew about concrete and the fact that you need to get on it within the first 8 to 12 hours to cut it so the shrinkage cracking is controlled. Otherwise, what's the point? So that's what I said. I looked at him right back in the eye and I said, what's the point? If you're going to come back on Monday, just go ahead and live with the cracks you got. And that kind of made him burst out into laughter, and he kind of joggled my elbow and said, yeah, I was just testing you. Welcome aboard, welcome to the team, and let's go get this thing built. So right from the very beginning, it's always been a test of wills, more or less. And I find myself kind of thriving in that environment. So that's why I do CA. It's the part of the project where the rubber really meets the road, and it's the most fun. And also you get to be creative in it, because there is a desperate need for an immediate solution right now. And I find the challenge of making those solutions or coming up with those solutions to be very, very rewarding. I'm not sure. I think that answered your question.
It did, great. That's I think a really good starting point for that, Nathan, as well. But we want to introduce now our last of the panel speakers here. So waiting for that to pull over here, we have Brian Varner. Brian Varner, FCSI, CCCA, Lead AP, is a California attorney who represents building owners, contractors, design professionals, and product manufacturers. He also coordinates the Construction Management Certificate Program at Sonoma State University and teaches courses in California construction law and contracts. He attained a CCCA certification in 1997, and I'm sure at some point Brian will probably let us know a little bit more about what that acronym means. So Brian, I'll hand it over to you with the exact same question as the last two speakers.
Thanks very much. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for making the time to hear this webinar. It's a reflection of your own commitment to professional development, and that's what CSI is all about. Contract administration. I grew up in a construction family. My father was a general building contractor. My closest uncle was a architect who worked on very large projects. And one of the things I learned growing up, as well as through my professional practice, is that while it's very important that a lot of time and focus and concentration be put into developing the best construction documents and project manual we can to build things, as Nathan said, when the rubber hits the pavement is when we build stuff. When we finally break ground and we start building a building or something, and we're using all those documents to build something, it's a very, very important part of the process, that being contract administration. We have design professionals that put the construction documents together and the project manual. We have very experienced contractors and tradespeople who know how to do their jobs in the field. But there's a vitally important role. I consider this very important in process, quality control, and quality assurance, that we have individuals that understand how to administer the contract, how to use all the information in the various pieces of the different contract documents and use them together in a comprehensive way to make sure that all of the activities are performed correctly, in a timely way, in a coordinated way, and especially in a documented way. It's more important than ever in today's world that we document the way buildings are built, not only from an owner's and facility manager standpoint in having that record available, but especially in this day and age in which we achieve goals of sustainability. And it's so important that the requirements that owners and design professionals put in the construction documents actually occur. So the role of the contract administrator in creating the record and creating the paperwork, even though it may be digital, to ensure that these the justification for the certifications can be attained, so that the people who come in and do commissioning and testing and eventually take over management and operation of the facilities have the information they need to do it correctly and end up with a well-built building that meets the owners and design professionals' expectations. So to me, the contract administration role in construction is very, very important. And let's remember something else. It's not one occupation that really stands by itself. You have contract administration specialists who work in the design firms. You know, once the project manual is done, once the contractor is selected and you break ground, you move into construction contract administration. There are specialists in design firms that work in construction administration. They may also work on design or other parts of what design professionals do, but they develop a real expertise concentrated in construction contract administration. Same with general building contractors and subcontractors. In order to meet your contractual obligations, in order to meet your own internal budgets, your own schedules, you have to make sure that everything is on a timely, coordinated, sequenced basis, not only in the field, but with all the paperwork that has to be processed. The substitution requests, the submittals for decisions that design professionals and owners have to make, the paperwork that is necessary to process requests for information, RFIs, progress payment requests. The body of knowledge you need as a contract administrator in a subcontractor's office or a general construction company's office is really equal to the knowledge that a contract administrator has to have in a design firm. And even in some public works and large private development companies or firms, there are contract administrators in those companies. So the occupation of contract administration really covers many of the player areas in construction, not just design professionals, as we've heard so far. So I think it's a field, it's an occupation field that's very broad. It's essentially vital to the success of a project from each player's standpoint. So I think the more you learn about contract administration, the better you can help meet your company's contract obligations and be a good team player with everyone else on a project to make sure the whole project is successful. I am not a front seat driver contract administrator. As an attorney, I'm a consultant to my clients, but I very regularly get involved in questions that come up during construction about how to resolve claims and questions and issues that come up. So my experience in working for all these different clients, as well as the education I received through the CSICA certification program, the CM certificate I got through the program I run at our local university, even to some extent the LEED credential, as well as all the other seminars that I go to regularly have helped my body of knowledge that's helped me be a better analyst of these issues on behalf of my clients, and then hence a better counselor and even advocate on their behalf to help them in resolving these things. Again, to me, one of the best ways to green our industry is to help ensure that our projects are completed in a way where we don't have the aftermath, the catastrophe of post-construction claims and lawsuits and the like. The more we can do to keep our projects on track, on budget, on schedule in the first place and build them right the first time, that's the best way to green this industry, I think. And so again, the value of what contract administrators do in the construction process can never be undervalued, can never be underestimated. I think that's it for now, unless, and I know we'll have questions and some more comments.
Well, thank you, Brian. In fact, we do have a question already lined up for us. So with those introductions of our panelists, hopefully now you all on the phone know who's on the phone to talk to here. We will get into the part of the session where we do ask for your feedback. So we have our first question here for all three of you coming in from Ian. Ian asks, how do you suggest the team as a whole keeps track of all the different paperwork?
I guess I'll take the first stab at that. I would strongly encourage each member of the team to make sure that they are maintaining their own set of records. I think the architect ultimately, in most cases, is going to be the master keeper of the record for the project. That would be, unless it was a CM type of a project, that in that case it would probably be the CM that was the ultimate record holder. But everybody should keep their own individual records, whether they are a subcontractor, owner, contractor, design professional, design consultant. They need to have their own complete record. You would not want to be put in a situation where you are relying on somebody else's information. Now, in doing that, as you come together as a team and have your project meetings or you're sharing information, you need to make sure that you're looking at everybody else's documentation. Make sure that it's meshed with yours and there's not any major conflicts between what they're saying the record is and what you're saying the record is. And there are software packages out there that you can use. There are packages that you use on a project-by-project basis, or packages where you can use them just your own internally, and not wanting to get into promoting one product over another. There are several out there. I have found that a lot of the major ones that the contractors use are not necessarily user-friendly for design professionals, and the ones that design professionals use might not cover everything that a contractor wants, which again is a reason for each person to make sure that they're maintaining their own separate record.
This is Nathan. I'd like to expand on that a little bit too. The question using the word team is interesting. Are we talking about the architectural team, from design to construction, or are we talking about the owner and contractors as well? I have a theory or philosophy, I guess, about documentation, and that is to do it. That's as Brian will testify. But it's interesting to me that during the design of a project, we, as architects, tend to file things by who we are talking to. If we are having a discussion with a landscape architect or the structural engineer or an agency or an owner, we're filing things by those types of categories. But during construction, the nature of the dialogue changes, and now we're talking to people about things. So instead of filing by people, we're going to file by things. So we're having dialogue about RFIs, requests for information. We're having our dialogue about change orders, or dialogue about construction issues, or field reports, or whatever it may be. So there's a clear break, I think, in the filing method from design to construction. When we're in CA, again, I append my RFIs or my documents, whatever it is I'm going to do. I file them with the RFI that we were discussing, or whether it's a submittal or some other type of document. I find that to be extremely useful in going back and finding the history of those things. And now there's some tools that help us do that, more or less automatically, like Nuforma is excellent at appending all the correspondence that goes back and forth to a given issue or document or RFI. So that's one way of keeping track of the paperwork. Logging is a big part of what we do just from document management, just knowing what drawings were issued and when, and what delta, what bulletin, what ASI, what comprises the bid set versus the permit set versus the issued for construction set, making sure that everybody has the same documents. I am a believer that the architect maintains the most current set of drawings. So when you're working with the field and the contractors, especially on a larger job where you've got 200 to 300 subcontractors, making sure that people are using the most current and correct drawings is a major undertaking. And I believe that's the architect's responsibility because they are the issuer of those documents. So developing a system, having a shared repository for those, whether such as Bluebeam Studio or Box or Dropbox, those types of things are hugely valuable for team collaboration. But it's the architect's job to maintain it, and that usually falls to the CA because they're the ones who are so intimately involved in issuing those updated drawings during the course of the work.
All right. I'm not sure if, Brian, you wanted to add to that, but that seems like we got a pretty good breakdown of some of that question. Ian, if there's any more to your question you'd like to ask, feel free to type it in. We can continue to visit that conversation. Meantime, I did have kind of a question here for... Oh.
I could add just a little
Sure.
ending chapter on that, on these comments. Really, really good question and comments. The administrative process of administrating the contract should be delineated in Division 1, General Requirements Specification Division. And so once we're in construction, the administration of, you say, paperwork, will usually be tracked in what become logs. As Nathan mentioned or alluded to, RFIs will end up having a logging system, so will substitution requests, change orders, progress payments, field inspection reports, everything that's used. And if we have one general contractor, then they will be processing all of the downstream paperwork submittals, RFIs, substitution requests, product samples, and the like that come from downstream subs through them, and work with their point person, contract administrator in the design professionals firm. So there's a natural logging process that's developed on how paperwork is tracked. And I think the two best are contract administration players that have the most complete set of everything would be the design professional CA and the general contractor CA, who are working one-on-one. The design professional will be handling all the communications to the owner and various consultants, professional consultants, while the GC is handling the logging and the processing of all the various submittals that come from downstream sources. And many of those people don't have to see all the other paperwork from the other players. Plumbers don't have to see the submittals of roofers and the like necessarily, unless that becomes necessary when they're working in penetrations through the roof, for example. But there's a natural logging system that's developed, and that just keeps everything running smoothly and predictably. And again, so everybody can look in the right places to find the information they need at any given time.
Okay, thank you, Brian.
It's interesting how yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I was just saying, it's interesting how the industry, though, is as delivery methods become more collaborative with design build and IPD and design assist, those documentation methods are evolving very rapidly. And so one of the things I wanted to talk about today was, the CCA certification process. Becoming a certified construction contract administrator was extremely helpful to me back in the past as sort of establishing a baseline and knowing how things were supposed to go according to the book. In a perfect environment, this is how the project relationship should be. That baseline helps tremendously in understanding or predicting the outcome of deviations from those baselines. So when you have a hybrid contract delivery method, you can kind of anticipate how it's going to modify, from baseline, how it's going to deviate. So you can kind of predict the outcome, the ramifications, and how to protect yourself and how to document things more carefully. I just think it's really interesting that in the industry today I'm seeing such a rapid evolution in the collaboration and documentation of projects. It's phenomenal. It's changed. Even I'm working on several large projects with the same contractor, different owners, the same contractor. And just in the last 3 years, same teams, we have evolved tremendously. It's really fun to watch.
All right, Matt, I'm going to take over for a second. We have some Twitter activities. First of all, thank you for those who have been joining the conversation online. I'll give a shout out to Jonathan Ryder. But Nathan actually did a great comment on Twitter, and Nathan, by the way, way to hold out on me that you had a Twitter account. You can follow him at 4WDPhoto for anyone on Twitter. But Nathan, you brought up a great point about how you said there was a tipping point in office size and project type that justifies having contract administrator specialists. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more? It might be easier on the phone than in 140 characters. And then really talk about what those smaller firms or projects can do to make sure they still get the expertise that contract administrators provide on a project.
Yes, I will give that a good shot to try to do that. So in my response, I said that there are certain types of projects that really are worthy of having a focused specialist, somebody who does CA for a living. Multifamily construction is very litigious, and that's a great example where you really need somebody who knows the product type and has built them before, knows what to watch for, and helps guide not just the contractor but the owner through best practices to get that built right. The other example is schools. I think that's another very litigious, sort of publicly funded environment where things can go sideways quick, and you're usually dealing with the lowest common denominator contractor, and it requires special handling to do that well. On the flip side, there are small commercial TIs, there's residential projects, there's things like that that are really can be best managed by whoever put together the drawings. And the tipping point for me is, like I said, the type of work. I think also if you're doing as a firm, if you have a lot of repeat work, like a similar type of projects. I worked for years. I did Taco Bell's and Starbucks. I must have did 150 of them in a short period of time. I became an expert in those, and it made sense to have one or two people do their own little CA department for that type of project, and they just banged them out one after another. So those kind of lend themselves well. But where it doesn't make sense to have a specialist, I think, again, is very small firms where you may have 2 or 3 people whose hats change during the course of the work. You're either the draftsman, you're the job captain, you're the project manager, now you're the CA. Or projects where you have the opportunity to expose more people to it. In my career, I had a 100-person firm, and we specialized in multifamily. But what we did is we created a group of people who were CAs. We had about 40 projects under construction. I had about 5 people who were doing dedicated full-time CA. And then we took the job captains for each of those projects that were under construction, and we rotated them into the CA pod. And so they got to build their own projects. And they did it under the direct supervision of a full-time CA person. But what that job captain would learn in the course of handling the RFI about why doesn't this dimension add up, and how the job captain's learning, he's finding young holes in his drawings and going, oh my gosh, they never do that again. When they finish that project, they've got a significant sense of accomplishment, but they go back into the office as a whole, and they share that experience with what they've learned, and makes them a much stronger architect. They no longer make those same mistakes. The next project that come out becomes faster, easier, and smoother, and they require less supervision. They become the supervisors that much faster. So we had this sort of this rotational system where we educate and mentor our job captains through the CA pod. But that was nice to having the repeat kind of work where we had enough dedicated CAs to do that. Small offices or firms that focus on smaller projects, you're going to be wearing all the hats. And, again, it's the education, it's the immediate feedback. If you drew it and you go out in the field and it didn't work, you have learned a valuable lesson. And it's how you respond to those scenarios that I think we ought to talk about as well. But it's such a phenomenal experience. You can't be a competent technical architect without having gone through the CA process. You just can't.
Great, thank you. I didn't know if any of our panelists, that was kind of taken from one of Nathan's personal tweets, but did anyone else have any thoughts on this subject?
I think Douglas and Nathan covered it very, very well.
And speaking of Twitter, just wanted to give you all, at Dairu Seamers gave contract administrators a little shout out. They said CAs are a vital part of our relationship with customers and builders, and thanks for your contributions and insights. So a little appreciation for you panelists. Hope you appreciate it today. Speaking on a comment that was brought up in passing about the CCCA, because this is a young professional series, what professional development opportunities have you guys had as CAs, or do you recommend people getting involved with, and how does it really help you in your day-to-day lives and how people view you in the industry?
This is Nathan. I'll start that bowl. I worked for a firm that trusted me to make, the expression they used was, don't make more mistakes in the morning than you can erase in the afternoon. So they gave me a great deal of latitude and trust, and they monitor what I did, but they let me go out into the field fairly early and develop myself. While that was happening, the CCA program was starting within the CSI, the certification program, and the manual practice, the old Chapter 7 of the manual practice, was a phenomenal guide for me. Now it's been replaced by the Construction Contract Administration Practice Guide, but that document is such a brilliantly written, concise book. I mean, in a short amount of pages, they've really covered the scope and depth of what does a CA do, how should they do it, what's the mentality they should do, and what to watch out for. And so I really recommend that program. I learned a lot from it. I think the biggest takeaway from that program for me, like I said earlier, was to learn the baseline. How are things, what in a perfect world, how would they be done? And so then I can, monitor how far from the baseline I was deviating on any given job. The other thing I learned was a mindset. As a construction administrator, whether or not you prepare the documents or not, you're going to come across scenarios where you wish something was in the drawings. And, it's going to be an ad, it's going to be a change order to the owner, it's going to be ugly, but there's just no way around it. In construction administration, we have to be faithful to what's in the documents. We are interpreters of the documents. And, it has to be reasonably inferable. If it's not there, it's not there. We have to own up to it. That really helps guide us in our responses to RFIs from the field or even change order requests. We have to be fair to what's in the drawings, and the CCA program really emphasized that, and it helps make me a much more balanced and fair individual out in the field. And with that sort of mentality, contractors are much more willing to work with me. Instead of just somebody who says, no, do it my way. I don't care if it's on the drawings, it should have been, that was the design intent, just do it anyway. And that never goes well. So having a very fair mindset is very important. I learned that through the CCA program.
To follow up on that, like Nathan said, I was fortunate enough to, when I first got into doing construction administration, work for a firm that gave me the latitude to go out and learn it and make mistakes and learn from my mistakes. I think that's probably the best way to learn, is to actually learn by doing. The way I try to train people is I will have them watch me do whatever it is first, whether it's reviewing an RFI or conducting a meeting or whatever. Let them watch me do it first. Then have them do it under my close supervision till we're comfortable with that, and then take the next step to letting them do it on their own and following up and reviewing what they did. To me, the best way to learn is to actually learn by doing. Now, there are webinars, and I've mentioned mine that I do with Jim Raines before, and we rely heavily on the practice book, the Construction Administration Practice Book. In fact, Jim helped author that book, and as Nathan said, it is a great resource for not only those who are doing it for the first time, but it's a refresher for those who have been doing it for a long time to just get a baseline as to what the process is supposed to be like. So that book's a good resource. Our webinar that we do once a month is, I think, a good source. CSI is great at trying to help advance the profession in those type of efforts. And there are other seminars, webinars, conferences that you just have to keep an eye out for. Lorman Educational Group, they will have some educational learning opportunities as well, but just, you have to kind of seek them out, but they are out there.
This is Brian. I'd like to chime in a little bit on this topic. First, I think one of the best opportunities you have to develop knowledge and expertise in contract administration is to become a member and get involved in CSI. CSI is not a profession or occupation-specific concentrated trade association. It's composed of construction professionals from literally every technical niche and occupation and profession in our entire industry. And that makes the organization unique compared to all the other organizations that are occupation specific. Participating in the CSI environment immerses you in this very rich, diverse room full of talent and knowledge. And through the conversations, through the technical programs that are offered regularly that constantly vary in subject matter, you cannot help but learn and learn all the time from the presenters and the people around you in the organization about how to do contract administration. Because CSI is a broad-based organization, I think it's really the industry's leader in teaching everyone in construction, everyone in all the other trade associations, about the importance of putting construction documents and project manuals together correctly, and then correctly using administrative process to build out these projects to make sure, as we've all mentioned, buildings are built the way owners and designers intended them in the first place, and on budget and on schedule. CSI has certification program, one of which is for contract administrators that at least two, if not all three, I think all three of us have the CA certification. There's another in specification writing and consulting. There's another one in product representation. So this organization is probably the leader in the industry in giving you these opportunities. But other organizations, I'm sure, have some programs as well, and there are commercial education providers, as has already been mentioned, that produce this kind of programming. I'd look locally. The construction management certificate program I run here at the local university, I happen to have John Gwill. He's a CSI member, nationally renowned educator on specifications and CA. He will be teaching his course, 30-hour course on CA this winter, starting in February. So look in your local area at your local community colleges and other organizations that have these kind of topics from time to time. But again, in passing, the best place, your best path for professional development for the rest of your career is in CSI. And if you get involved and participate to some extent, it won't be too long before you realize this, and it will help you grow and learn for the rest of your career and beyond.
I know Matt and I like that pitch. Thank you, Brian.
And as I noticed, everybody,
encourage everyone to join.
As I noticed, everybody, I did put a couple of links into the chat box for you all related to if you are interested in the practice group that Douglas and Jim Raines work on together. That does meet the fourth Thursday of every month from 12 until 1 Eastern. As he mentioned, next week we do have part 3 of a 4-part series on, or actually no, part 2 of a 4-part series on mistakes that architects can make. We're not implying that they do, we're just saying that sometimes they can. And then we do real-life examples of how to potentially work through some of those issues. So if you're interested in that, feel free to check that out. And additionally, I did put the links in there for both CSI Certificate, which is the CDT, as well as the certification, the CCCA. Links to both of those in the audience chat box as well for all of you. I did have one more question here before we kind of start to wrap up today's session for all of you. It's been mentioned a couple of different times that while we may talk about people as being the contract administrator or the contract administrators as a title, it's been mentioned many times that it isn't necessarily an independent profession, and it's something that potentially anybody can kind of get involved in. And you've all done a great job of a sales pitch of kind of making it sound like something that might be exciting and interesting to get involved in. So for those on the call that maybe aren't, a background in architecture and design or don't have a background in law, like the three of you all kind of have those backgrounds. For those other people on the call that maybe have a background, in engineering or have a background in one of the skilled trades, what would be a good first thing that they can look into to maybe get a first-hand experience of this? Is it something where you just ask the boss to sit in on some, administration-related tasks, or is there a specific person in the building team they should go to get that experience or that input from? We'd love to hear from you on that idea.
This is Nathan. It would be challenging for someone outside of the design environment to be able to do CA. You could theoretically have a contractor come in and do it. There is a mindset there that you have to guard against, and I'll get into that in a minute. I have had one of my most successful employees was a structural engineer, and he answered structural RFIs with his own firm. He understood the process of CA, but he also wanted to explore more of the opportunities in design and how, so obviously he's a technical mindset. He's not the kind of guy who starts off with a blank piece of paper, but he valued and preserved the design intent and was able to know the technical. He knew materials very well. So an engineer type who can come in with a good materials knowledge and some basis of understanding how construction works can do an adequate job of it. In this particular case, the structural engineer came in and quickly was promoted to associate partner. He just did a fantastic job. He understood the materials, he understood the process, and once he learned how to preserve and protect the design intent, he was fantastic. And that was a straightforward, not a straightforward, that was a very lateral move for him to go from structural engineering to architecture, but he did it successfully. I've had contractors come in there's a lot of young folks who have gone to school and studied architecture, and then they get out of the program and start being a contractor. And after a few years, they become a little bit disillusioned, and they want to be more on the creative side. I welcome them with wide open arms. They can come right in. We kind of got to start them over again, and they have to learn more about the process. What does the architect do that's different from the contractor? And the first thing they realize is it takes so much more thinking. We don't sit there and produce. We often have to sit and think before we can produce, accurately. And that's just something that contractors don't understand and have a difficult time providing a value to out in the field as well. But once they learn that process, then somebody who has had construction experience can be implemented very successfully.
This is Brian. Very quickly, besides getting involved in CSI, I think really the best place to get an excellent foundational body of knowledge to develop your knowledge in the CA area would be to go through CSI's Construction Document Technologist certificate program. It's curriculum that covers what the project delivery systems are, and then reviews some of it in more concentrated detail in how particularly the design, bid, build process works, what the various contract documents are, what's contained in them, what requirements are there, how those requirements affect and modify other terms and conditions and requirements in other contract documents, and then therefore how all the documents are used together to administer projects. I can't think of a better place to start in developing a CA body of knowledge than to go through CSI's Construction Document Technologist program. Non-members can go through it. It's available to everyone in the world. I think that's a great place to start.
I agree with both of the two previous speakers. Speaking in terms of an architect, the intent during the construction administration phase is to ensure that the design intent is displayed in the documents as being followed through with. So you have to have that understanding of what the design intent was to be able to perform this task effectively. And it might be tougher for some folks that don't have that architectural training or that design background to be able to do that. We are the initial, in most cases, interpreter of the documents, and so you have to have that within you. That said, I had an administrative assistant who worked with me over several years, who came to develop that base of knowledge, and I felt comfortable in allowing them to get more involved in reviewing RFIs, doing site visits, and that type of thing. And this person had a financial background, had no architectural training at all. So it can be done, but I think it takes longer, and it may be harder. And if you don't have that and you want to get into this, I think starting with CSI, and I know we're all plugged in CSI, and it's not because this is sponsored by CSI, it's because it truly is a wonderful organization that its goal is to advance the knowledge and advance the construction industry.
All right, well, I'm not going to turn down a plug like that.
Exactly.
But we are getting to the end of the hour, and we do like to stay on time. So I'm going to do similar to the question I ask every month. For all of you on the call, we've talked a lot about, construction administration now, but looking into next month, where we'll be looking at contractors and understanding what they do. If you could give us just a brief story or a brief anecdote or something related to your work as a contract administrator and how you have or have never, in some cases maybe, worked with a contractor as a way to kind of tie into next month. Oh, they're all quiet. Nobody wants to share a story.
Heard contractor come up a few times today. I know they have the stories.
What was the topic for next month?
The topic for next month is going to be
understanding the contractor. So
Yep.
if you can just...
This is Doug. We interact with contractors on a daily basis. I could tell stories forever, good and bad, about interactions with contractors. But I guess the key to me is having a good, open line of communication between the contractor and the architect or the design professional. Open, honest communication that is timely. If you have that, then you're 99% to having a successful project. And that includes the documents being put together in the the drawings, the specs. That's a form of communication. Those have to be put together well. When you're processing RFIs, they need to be answered and asked in a precise, clear manner. Processing payment applications, whatever it is that you're doing, that communication has to be there, and you need to build a relationship with the contractor and build a sense of trust. And sometimes that's difficult to do, and in a typical design bid build scenario, you kind of think it's adversarial, but you have to find a way to overcome that for the good of the project and for the good of your owner. So without getting into war stories, that's kind of a big overview, is having that communication established and trying to build a trustful relationship with the contractor.
This is Brian. I think Douglas is absolutely spot on. I'm reminded of something my father taught me growing up. He was a general building contractor, and he said that success in construction is not only about performing your work really well and producing a really good product for the owner, Equally important is the quality of the service that you provide your owners and others along the way. It's how you get referrals and repeat work. And then to draw from today's conversation, the more your expertise is developed in the area of contract administration, and the smoother those communications go with all the players, particularly the design team, you will please the owner. You'll please the owner's first, right, and left-hand consultant design professionals, and this is how you get repeat work and referrals and build your business. So it's about good work, it's about really good service, and that includes really excellent contract administration.
Well, it looks like Nathan's going to be quiet on us. So, I'm not sure.
Twitter.
Oh.
I think that communication with the contractor, you really got to understand what their needs are, and you got to get in the mindset of the enemy, so to speak, is what Clausius used to say. But you have to, you need to understand the timing of when they need the information. They're doing what I consider to be phenomenally difficult project or process. They've got to look at a ceiling plan and know that a conduit's got to go there for a light fixture that has to be in the slab before the wall is built. And so they've got to have the conduit routed to the footing. It's not really shown on the drawings necessarily. You have to be able to figure all that out in the sequence of construction before they really begin. And that's a difficult thing to do. They don't always do it right, and that's why we're here. We help them get through to the end game process. But understanding their needs, dimensioning from hard to soft, using grid lines instead of partition walls that aren't built yet. So how do you locate a toilet? Well, the waistline's got to go in that slab first. Well, you can't dimension the toilet to a wall. The wall's not there, so they're out in the middle of a dirt field going where? So understanding what they need to dimension from is really important. Understanding the cost pressures they're under. Knowing, document control. I mentioned that before. What is your baseline? What's your bid set? And how does that evolve since then? When did they bid it? How are you tracking the changes between growing issuances so that they can accurately price them? It's a very, very, very collaborative issue. Nowadays, we're getting contractors on board earlier and earlier in the design process with Design Assist and IPD. They truly are collaborators, and it's absolutely phenomenal to work with a great team. I'm doing projects simultaneously where I have the worst contractor I've ever experienced. A 1,700 square foot building that's taken over 4 years to build, and I'm also working with one of the best contractors I've ever experienced. It's a 160,000 square foot building that got built in 18 months. That goes to tell you that it's the relationship and not the challenge of the project to be successful. So, working very collaboratively early on is a huge thing to do. But understanding the contractor's needs and what do they need out of the relationship. I also have a methodology or mentality, like philosophy, that's what I'm looking for. I have a philosophy of being firm, fair, and fast. We talked about firm earlier in the project, being fair to what's in the contract documents. Sorry, talking about fair. Being fair within the contract documents. Firm, when the contractor wants to deviate from those documents, you have to say no, unless they've got a really compelling reason. And then fast. You've got to be able to respond to things in a very timely fashion because they need it now. They're scheduling, they're pricing, they got deliveries, they have long lead items. We have to respond immediately or else it's too late. So firm, fair, and fast is my methodology of dealing with contractors.
Great. I think that's a great way to wrap up that session. As we go to the last slide, I just want to say thank you not only to all of the people in attendance today, but also to Brian, Douglas, and Nathan. I think your input was invaluable, and especially for you offering to do it for free, it's even better. So I thank you all for donating your time and your knowledge and your experience in today's call. But just wanted to wrap up here, as we've alluded to for next month's call, but also a reminder for those, if you have questions or comments after this session, about this session, past sessions, or upcoming sessions, feel free to reach out to both Caitlin and I. You see our information, both our email and our Twitter handles on the screen, as well as the web addresses for both CSI's homepage and the Young Professional Series, what we call a microsite or secondary website. And just a reminder again to everybody, next month we will be meeting on February 19th, again from 2 until 3 p.m. Eastern. We're going to go on to the next session, like we said, to understanding the contractor. So as you see here with the quick little short blurb, I always kind of made funny here. We're learning that they're more than just the guys at hard hats that you see in truck commercials, but what they actually do and the work they have to deal with managing both the demands of the design side as well as the skilled trades that they may be overseeing. So we look forward to you.
Those descriptions, don't you?
I do have fun. Again, thank you to our three panelists as well as those in attendance, and thank you to Caitlin. I'll leave it to her to close out with any last comments, or look forward to seeing you in February.
Yeah, as Matt said, we just invite everyone to encourage the conversation with us online. We have our Young Professionals LinkedIn group, so if you have any questions for the panelists or any questions you want to ask each other about this session or about coming up for next month's session, feel free to go to our LinkedIn group. Or on Twitter, we had some Twitter action today, which always makes me happy. And again, the hashtag, if you want to share anything involving the industry or professional development, our hashtag is CSIYPS, and we invite you to join us next month. Thank you all for attending, and I hope you enjoyed the session.